Okay, so we'll start chapter 6, and we're going to look at observational methods. All right, so first let's talk about quantitative research. And just to delineate between quantitative and qualitative research, just again, quantitative research, to make it as simple as possible, quantitative research, you're going to work with numbers and statistical analysis. Qualitative research, you're going to be looking at words. So instead of numbers and quantitative research and qualitative research, you're going to be looking at words and then you thematically analyze those words. In this class, you will be doing quantitative research. Unless there's a special case in which you would like to do qualitative, we could do that as well, but in general, we'll do quantitative. So with quantitative research, we're looking at variables that can be quantified. We can actually measure specific variables, and we generally use large samples. This is kind of the difference. So say within qualitative research, you may use, let's say, 6 participants. In quantitative research, you may use 600. That's not going to be the case here in this class, but that would kind of looking at if we're comparing and contrasting. And the results are expressed in numerical terms using statistical descriptions. And we commonly will use experiments, surveys, structured interviews, and systematic observations. Again, that we can quantify and measure the data statistically. Qualitative research, we're looking on behavior in natural settings. We're going to collect data about small groups or in limited settings. And literally, like with qualitative studies, you might be looking at a case study, which might include one individual, or you might be looking at something in which a study in which maybe you do have 8 to 12 participants. But again, it's going to be much smaller. You're looking at data in non-numerical or narrative terms, and this could either be the data you're collecting is either possibly going to be through interviews or through observation. And literally, you're using words. And you're going to thematically analyze those words that you collect. And that's what you will base your conclusions on. And you will interpret it and base your conclusions on those words. So we have naturalistic observation. This is when we literally observe humans in a natural social setting. It's also called field observation, field work, ethnography. We study people in social and organizational settings or like animals in their natural habitats. That would be the best example of this. Um, and an example of this in 1997, Sylvia Scribner used naturalistic observation in her research on practical thinking. So, the description and interpretation of data when it comes to naturalistic observation, the goal is to provide a complete and accurate picture of what's occurred in the setting. So, you might describe the setting, events, and persons, and then you analyze and interpret what was observed in, again, the words that you're collecting. There has to be detailed field notes. Observers may include like key informants to learn about the setting. So you're interviewing people, talking to people about their lives, again, interviewing, and examining documents that are also produced in the setting. So you might go back and you find historical documents that may bolster the study. Also, audio or video recordings may be used in order to collect that information as well. And the final report's usually an analysis by using specific examples to defend the conclusions. Um, okay, in general, the data, it's usually primarily qualitative instead of quantitative. So again, we're collecting words. We're not collecting numbers. The descriptions are often richer and closer to the phenomenon being studied than statistical representation. So with qualitative research, you are going to obtain the most rich and robust data because you are getting the information directly from the participant's mouth as they experience something. That's in comparison to collecting numerical data in which individuals will have to indicate their agreement, disagreement, or whatever it might be regarding a behavior numerically. So you're going to obtain the most detailed data through this qualitative process. Quantitatively, we might miss something. We might miss something that somebody would add if given the chance, but we aren't including that in our survey. If you were doing interviews with people, it gives you the opportunity to collect all of the data that you might miss otherwise quantitatively. Also, there's participant observation. This is when we take an active insider role in what we're studying, kind of like incognito. This could yield data not available to non-participant observers. And the researcher may lose objectivity, however, because again, when you are researching something, there's always going to be some sort of bias that you might have. And that unfortunately could roll over into how you analyze you might collect the information or analyze the information as well. So you do have to decide how much you're going to conceal your identity as well. That's going to potentially raise ethical issues. Additionally, naturalistic observation is most useful when investigating complex social situations, especially if you again do a kind of incognito, your presence may alter individuals' behavior. Also, again, this is helpful if you believe that the information you would get from a survey does not completely encapsulate what you could obtain by observing people's behaviors in and of themselves. It's less useful for studying well-defined hypotheses under precisely specific conditions or phenomena. That is going to be more quantitative in nature. But here's the thing, it can be extremely time consuming and require detailed analysis. The type of, again, the quantitative correlational survey type study you are going to complete is going to be the most efficient, least time consuming process of research. Whereas qualitative research or naturalistic observation, you're going to have to spend lots of time with your participants, possibly many instances with your participants, maybe not just meeting with them once or observing them once, but many times. We also have systematic observation. This is the careful observation of one or more specific behaviors in a specific setting. So maybe we are looking at um, potential like um maybe certain types of eye contact. Are we observing people making eye contact in certain situations? It's going to deal with only a few specific behaviors. We're literally getting down to the nitty-gritty as to what behaviors we are observing. Maybe it is how many times, again, maybe people make eye contact or shake each other's hands. And the observations are quantifiable. We can look numerically at how many times or how often something happens. And there's usually some sort of prior hypothesis about the behaviors, and that in this situation, I predict that handshakes are going to be increased. It can be both used in naturalistic and lab settings as well, and you're going to code that information. So when it comes to coding systems, we have to decide, okay, which behaviors are of interest, and then we choose a setting in which these can be observed. Then you develop a coding system or rules used to categorize observations. And that may be, again, with eye contact, we code that as a number 1 in and of itself. You're not going to say eye contact. You would code that as possibly a numeric value. Also, some methodological issues here. Equipment has to be selective, maybe pencil and paper, types of video, audio recordings. Then there's also this issue of reactivity, like we talked about in the last chapter. And this is the possibility of your presence affecting people's behaviors. Again, that's where it might come into play and like, okay, is your presence going to interfere with how people would naturally behave? And to help ensure a high degree of reliability, there might be 2 or more raters that are used to code the behavior. So again, you're making sure that your biases do not play a role because you have another rater as well, and you rate these things together. Increasing objectivity. So also, for many research questions, samples of behavior are taken over an extended period of time. Again, this was why it could take a long time, and it's time consuming. Technology now enables researchers to sample individuals' behaviors in real time in everyday situations. We have experience sampling method. This is used to alert participants to complete a data collection procedure at that moment in time. So this could be like there is a notification on somebody's phone that in the morning and at noon and at night, they report their specific behaviors. Maybe it's how depressed do you feel? Or how many times have you washed your hands today? Again, there's something that goes off that indicates now the participant needs to collect data, or maybe there is a notification on their smartwatch in that, okay, we need to take our blood pressure at this point in time. Also, there's the day reconstruction method, and this is the method of obtaining self-reports of daily activities, moods, and emotions. This could be like a daily journal somebody that participant keeps. It asks participants to think about the previous day and write about distinct episodes that occurred. Now, case studies, again, this would be any of your serial killer documentaries on TV. That is a case study. It's an observational method that provides a detailed description of an individual, group of people, or situation. It doesn't necessarily involve naturalistic observation. Um, it might be a description of a client's history, symptoms, and therapeutic interventions, or again, somebody's history. There's a psychobiography. It's a type of case study in which a researcher applies psychological theory to explain the life of an individual. So again, this would be like any of the serial killer documentaries and the documentarian coming to some sort of conclusion about why the individual did what they did, possibly even getting into like lead exposure or childhood trauma. That would be basing the case study and the conclusions on a psychological theoretical framework. And these case studies are valuable in informing us about conditions that are rare or unusual. Again, serial killers. We don't have a great sample, a statistically significant sample of serial killers to do a lot of quantitative research on them. So we kind of go back to like case studies. And they might lead to hypotheses that can be tested with other methods. So again, if you might find like, okay, across these case studies, we see a lot of childhood trauma in these serial killers' lives. And so, is this something that we would be able to quantifiably study in individuals that, might end up in prison or conduct other antisocial behaviors? What kind of childhoods did they have? We have a greater population that we would be able to study to come to possibly those conclusions or develop a further theory. We also have archival research. This is when we use information that's already out there to answer research questions. Maybe it's census information, maybe it is FBI information or other governmental databases. There's also a lot of collegiate institutions have data sets that you can use. That would be archival research. You're analyzing existing data. It might be statistical records, survey archives, written audio and video records. We also have content analysis. It's the systematic analysis of existing documents. And so this might be the analysis of, written documents and like the systematic observation. It requires researchers to devise coding systems that raters use to quantify the information. So this might be like you want to study terrorists. And so you might, again, you're probably not going to be able to get a hold of them very easily. So maybe you study the content of their websites or their writings. And you note, again, how often certain things come up or how regularly, or this is prominent or that is prominent, and you code it in order to quantify it. And archival research does have the potential to address questions that can't be studied through other means. Again, we want to study terrorists. We might have to do this content analysis of their writings or of their media because they may be difficult in order to study, one-on-one. But it also has limitations. The records might be difficult to get. And we can never be sure of the accuracy of information collected by somebody else. So again, even though there's a terrorist that says this or that on their website, it might not be completely accurate or an accurate representation of them in general. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of quantitative and qualitative research in general, and then looking at really the process of observation in research as well. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. I hope you have a great day.